of Glyndebourne. David, for those who may not be familiar with Glyndebourne, can you describe what it does?
Well, we're most famous, I think, for a summer opera festival which lasts from May through to August. But as well as putting on opera in the summer, we also have a tour that happens every year in the autumn, and we have a year-round education programme.
You stream your live performances into cinemas. When did you start doing this and why? And you also do Through the Guardian on the internet as well.
Yeah.
So
we started cinema activity in 2007. It seemed a natural extension to us of filming opera, and things were just beginning to take off with people putting alternative art form into cinemas. And we were actually the first company in the United Kingdom to screen operas in cinemas, and we did that with our production of Così fan tutte into Odeon cinemas in 2007.
And what works have you screened in this way, and who chooses what works are screened?
Well, since 2007, actually earlier than that, since 2005, we've been filming as much as we can of the new productions we put on each summer. So we select on the basis of the new creations that we have and things that haven't been filmed before. And the filming is part of a bigger package in a way, which is to make sure that we have everything that we do here, all the productions we do, a filmed record of them, which we can then exploit in various ways, cinema being one of them.
And so you would look to do what other things in this multimedia strategy?
Well, the other things we would do, as well as going to cinemas, is online streaming, as we mentioned earlier on, both on our website and currently in relationship with The Guardian. We would also actually use little bits of footage for part of our education programme as part of our education website. We would sell to television companies both in the UK and abroad, and video on demand is something in the future I suspect we'll be doing more.
So have you made television sales yet, or is that in the future?
Yes, and we have a relationship with the BBC, for instance, which sometimes involves them co-producing and sometimes them acquiring, and we produced quite a lot of our films have been seen in France and Germany through Arte, through their television company, and indeed in Japan through NHK.
And how do you film live so that it doesn't interfere with the performance?
Well, we're very careful to make sure that the performance goes ahead exactly as it would do, because we film in front of a live audience. We have two filming evenings. The first is effectively a rehearsal, and the second one is the performance. We take out about 40 or 50 seats from sale on each night, and the cameras are fairly discreetly placed in the auditorium.
Within the audience? Within
the audience, mainly right at the back of the stalls. And so that, we're realistic about the fact that, if you're sitting near a camera, we will either reduce the price of the seats or take it off sale altogether.
And you get a full stage shot and you get close-ups?
We get both, and I think the whole world of filming opera has become increasingly sophisticated in terms of lighting, for instance, is the one area that sometimes has to be tweaked very slightly, but unlike the old days, you can now film in normal lighting conditions for most productions.
And how many cinemas can the performances be seen in when they're streamed?
Well, we've just started on this really, and we have a relationship this year with Picture House, and this summer our screenings will be going into between 50 and 100 in the UK through Picture House, and a few more abroad. Obviously, it's something we would like to expand into a greater range of cinemas in the future.
And through that and The Guardian Live, how many people are seeing it outside of the live performance?
Well, last year we reckoned that altogether the people who saw our shows digitally, whether it was online or through cinema screenings, was around 100,000 people, which actually happens to be roughly the number of people that see a whole Glyndebourne festival, because we have a fairly small theatre. So it equates almost exactly to the number of people seeing the live festival.
So you double in effect?
We effectively double our audience.
Yes. And do the cinemas get full houses for these live streamed events?
It varies really according to where they are and what the local enthusiasm is. I mean, interestingly, our cinema Uckfield down the road is always absolutely packed. It's always packed in Aldborough, places where there's often a festival, and it's sometimes harder to find audiences where there is less live opera around.
And what's the financial deal with the cinema chains?
We have a very straightforward 50-50 split between the box office, which means that we have some of our investment covered, and the cinema can cover their costs.
And what happens with The Guardian? You just provide it as a
With
free
the Guardian,
service?
yes, the Guardian at the moment is a free relay to the Guardian. It's a free streaming for our audiences who watch it, and we go and work to find sponsorship to cover the costs that we each have in putting them on.
And what do you know about these cinema audiences? Are they the same as your live audiences?
Well, that's a big question for us, because if I'm really honest, we don't know as much about them as we would like to. I think what we'd like them to be, obviously, are people who don't normally come to our performances. I suspect that actually quite a lot of people are a regular opera audience, but we need to do more research to find out a bit more about who they are.
And how do you think that the live streaming in cinema compares to seeing the work on the stage?
Well, I think it's a similarly engrossing experience, but it is a different one. And I suppose on the plus side, you are very often seeing things in the cinema that actually you don't see in the theatre. You have the beauty of close-up, which means that there are things that you can see that you don't see in the theatre. And indeed, sometimes I see things in cinemas I hadn't even noticed were going on in a production. On the debit side. There is a director who's making those decisions for you rather than you as an audience making the decisions yourself.
And presumably it has some impact on the performers, because the camera is fairly unforgiving.
Yes, it does, but I think that the performers are now very used to having cameras in for opera performances, not just here but in other opera companies. And I think what it does do clearly is it I hope highlights great performances, and maybe exposes acting in some performances that could be a little more subtle. I think we're very lucky that the whole standard of acting in opera has increased enormously over the last 20 years, and I don't know whether filming has been a part of that. It might have been.
And is there not maybe a disjuncture between what is stage acting, which actually has to be quite wide and broad and to the back of the house, and something that has to be much more subtle in terms of facial movements for film when you're full on?
Yes, I think that's true, and occasionally singers have come to me and said, I would like to see the first rehearsal, and singers sometimes do ask for the film of the run-through, and they can say, I'm in close-up there, I won't make that gesture quite so big the next time around. But it is one of those little compromises that we have to always think about, that there's still the audience out there, the live audience, and fundamentally we're playing to a live audience and we're recording what the performance would be like in front of a live performance. The other alternative, of course, would be to go into a studio for a week and do it in a different way. We can't afford to do that, and I think actually you'd also lose some of the excitement of the fact.
There's some of the sort of parallel discussion with Les Miserables, isn't there, in terms of you are playing it for live. It isn't a recorded event in that sense.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I would actually say I do think on the whole the benefits outweigh the losses in terms of what you see in the terms of detail of performances. I think you see some incredible things on camera which actually can really enhance what you would see in the theatre.
There's something unforgiving though about the camera. Some of the performers play parts that they appear older and slightly larger than they are in their character.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to have an impact on the kind of performers that come through?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that the style of performance in an opera is going to change from one opera to another anyway. I think we're used to seeing, if you see a buffo comedy by Rossini, you probably see a broader scale of performance than you will in a serious drama by Janacek. Anyway, that's the nature of the piece, that's the nature of what it is. And I think probably in the end we have to accept, as I say, this isn't a film of an opera, it's a film of a performance of an opera.
Yeah, so opera is what it is.
Exactly.
And people have to kind of live with that.
Exactly. And I think on the whole...
Not be younger and thinner and...
No, they can't. But again, I still think things have changed. I think even now, certainly when we're casting operas, we are looking for people of the right shape, the right size, the right age, the right character to play those roles, not just the right voices. And I think as that has moved forward and as we've developed in that way, so filming of opera becomes much more sensitive and much more credible.
Do you think other arts organisations like orchestras and smaller theatre companies should consider live streaming?
Well, I think certainly there are possibilities that are expanding now. I think the introduction of the National Theatre, for instance, into this frame, which I think we were probably slightly surprised about, has been hugely successful in terms of what they do. And likewise for orchestras. I think we have it lucky in a way as opera companies. As I say, there's a financial equation here, which is, it costs us a considerable amount of money to film these operas. We have to get the income back in. We work as an international...
Order of magnitude, what does it?
Oh, I mean, in the end, it costs sort of somewhere between £200,000 and £300,000 each time we film an opera.
So it's significant.
It's significant, and it's different according to what the opera is, according to the number of people in it. And actually, what people tend to forget is here at Glyndebourne, where we tend to sell out, taking 40 seats out of the theatre is quite a significant loss of income. So that's included in that.
And how much of that is covered by the financial return from the cinemas that we talked about earlier?
A very, very small proportion.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at various different ways of recouping our investment, and it's a long-term thing. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 10 years, but it might happen in 20.
So we're back to that multimedia strategy we were talking about, where, in a sense, you can do many things with.
Exactly, you make as much as you can, and we're back to looking at sponsorship as well. Let's face it, that's another way in which we can make these things viable, is to go to a sponsor and say, we would like you to underwrite the cost of this so that we can allow people to see this work for free.
And how much of it is in the cachet of it being live? In other words, if you were to say to a cinema, you can have it and run it at any time you wish, what would you think the kind of response to that be? Well,
I think live is still more appealing, but actually this summer we are doing a mixture of live and recorded. So all the operas this summer at Glyndebourne will be appearing in cinemas, and some will be live and some of them will be from previous recordings. I think the advantage of the previous recordings is the fact that there's an awful lot of work that goes into re-editing these pieces once they've gone out live to put an added polish to them, which you can't get in a live screening. So, for instance, when Billy Budd goes out into cinemas, it will be the recording from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but it's been superbly edited in a very cinematic way to make it, I think, more than worth the value of being non-live.
David, thanks for talking to me today.
Pleasure.